Welcome to this module on animals and morality. We'll talk about the moral status of animals. Peter Singer says that when we use animals as sources of food or when we use them as research subjects, we are being speciesists. And speciesism, he says, is a dangerous ism, not unlike sexism or racism. We'll look at Bonnie Steinbach's reply to Singer's notion of speciesism and examine her idea of equality. We'll look at the use of animals in research, in particular Carl Cohen's argument against animal rights. And we'll look at what the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, have to say about the use of animals in research for medical, cosmetic purposes, and what they have to say about the use of animals as sources of food. Thus far, mostly we've focused on what people owe each other, but there are important questions to be asked about the moral status of animals, about what our obligations are concerning them, concerning the environment, and these questions have never been more poignant. Factory farms enable our meat eating at great animal suffering. Many scientific experiments inflict pain on animals, and some argue that this suffering is unjust, that we have a moral obligation to stop these practices. We're also adversely impacting animals as well as future generations of humans on a much broader scale. Human industry surrounding the factory farm, surrounding the current ways in which we raise cattle, contribute to the greenhouse gas production that raises global average temperature. It seems that in addition to this being a matter of animal rights or animal suffering, certainly the welfare of animals, whether you believe that animals have rights or not, it's also an issue that affects human beings and their future as well, our future. So in this module, we'll explore what different philosophers have said regarding our moral obligations regarding animals, and examine different laws and policies designed to help regulate our activities with regard to the treatment of animals, and perhaps tangentially with regard to our stewardship of the environment. So after completing this module, you should be familiar with different approaches to the moral status of animals, ethical arguments about our obligations to animals, chief arguments for and against the use of animals for food, the use of animals in research, and be somewhat familiar with the legal status of animals and the guidelines governing animal research. Philosopher Laurie Gruen, a contemporary philosopher at Wesleyan University, has skillfully summarized many central issues on this topic in her essay entitled The Moral Status of Animals, published in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Gruen notes that discovering what, if anything, is distinctive about human moral status is increasingly important among philosophers and among those outside of philosophy who are concerned about our treatment of non-human animals. Many philosophers have argued that there is no ethically justifiable way to distinguish human moral status from animal moral status, and thus that there is no way to justifiably deny animals moral consideration. Others argue that humans do have special moral status that justifies the suffering and death of animals for human benefit. Some assert that our very biological makeup as human beings is what makes us morally special, but species membership is not relevant to making moral determinations. As Gruen writes, species membership is a morally irrelevant characteristic, a bit of luck, which is no more morally interesting than being born male or female, Malaysian or French. Thus, species membership itself cannot support the view that members of one species, namely ours, deserve moral consideration that is not owed to members of other species.